Hello, everyone. So instead of doing a final quiz, which I know you're all going to be so disappointed, no more Professor Schlimmer quizzes, um, we are going to do a final project. And I think that you will get a lot more out of the final project because it is to kind of look at a case that relates to business law. But don't start breaking out in hives. It's not a case brief because you'll be actually doing research on a U.S. Supreme Court decision. You'll want to read the decision and the opinion, but you won't have to brief it like a normal brief. And I have an example that I am going to show you. So the first thing you need to do is look for a Supreme Court decision that from the US that relates to a topic that we've covered. So if you know you have a specific interest in a topic, you could be US Supreme Court cases, contracts, or um, torts, or anything that we've covered. Or you could just put in, famous business law, US Supreme Court cases. Then you're probably going to want to look into that case a little bit and see what it's about before you actually choose to start a whole PowerPoint and then realize it's really one you're not interested in. But there is a rubric attached to the final project. It's 70 points, so this gives you an opportunity to get some points racked up. But on the flip side, if you blow it off, it's a lot of points you could lose. So let's get some points racked up. Okay, so the first thing is you're going to have an introduction and title page, and that's going to be worth 5 points. And you want to basically do an engaging title that includes the case citation, and you want then the introduction to be relevant to the issue and tell them. And we're going to do this in a PowerPoint presentation. You don't have to present the actual PowerPoint. You are going to just submit it to me as a PowerPoint, Google Slides, or anything comparable to a presentation format. This is going to be a lot easier than putting it together in a written work, and it really gives me an idea if you understand the issue when you just have to lay out specific points. So my title page, I have said pushing the limits of the First Amendment. I'm going to talk about the Hustler magazine versus Falwell case that I discussed briefly this semester. So my title, Pushing the Limits of the First Amendment, gives you an idea of what the case is. But then my introduction, I used a quote from a case that was cited in the Supreme Court decision that I'm talking about. And basically, it's the fact that society may find speech offensive is not a sufficient reason for suppressing it. Indeed, if it is the speaker's opinion that gives offense, that consequences is a reason for according constitutional protection. So your title page could be something else. I just thought I'd use a quote from a case that's in the case that really talks about, hey, this is going to be about maybe offensive speech that now we're not suppressing because of a constitution. And then my next slide is going to tell you, hey, affording more protection to political speech. So the case, this is the introduction. It's about, you don't have to have full sentences as long as I can look at the slide and understand and follow it. Okay? Then you're going to talk about the parties. And first of all, what I want to say is you need at least, other than the case itself, you need at least, I believe, 5 citations, but check that with the rubric again. And so you're going to look the parties up. Is there anything interesting pertaining to this case? I picked a case that had fascinating people, okay? And this section is going to be 10 points. So you want to tell me a little bit about the parties. And so in this one, we have Larry Flynt, and look at how easy I can put it. Pornographer, own multiple strip clubs, launched Hustler magazine in 1974. Then I went and carried over on the side information about Hustler magazine. Controversial because of its graphic, obscene, and tasteless publications. At its peak in the 1970s, more than 2 million subscribers. So look at that. That would take me maybe a page and a half in a written work, but I can lay it all out there and it just looks like I can read it and know what we're talking about. So every fact you have is going to have a little citation. You can do this one of two ways. You take and put in your notes like a number one for the first citation. You can just then, or in the PowerPoint itself, like I did. Then you can go down below and put it in your notes. And you're just going to copy and paste. If it's a website that you got the information, just copy and paste it. Or you can have a running at the end list of your citations. But anything that's a fact that you're not just making kind of an opinion or anything on has to have a citation. Okay. So my next slide is Jerry Falwell. He's the televangelist, founder of Moral Majority, a political organization to support moral conservative values. Controversial because of his remarks that many Americans perceived as intolerant or bigoted. So I put a 3 up in the title portion, and that means everything I've received from this in this slide, I got from that source. So you don't have to put 3, 3, 3. You can just put 3 at the top, and that's where I got it. That was my source, and I put that in my notes. So 2 slides, really easy. You want to give the parties, but you got to give us enough information about who they are and what they are. So the case background is 15 points, and basically we are going to say what's happened to get them to court, right? Why did they get to court in the first place, right? You can get a lot of this information from the case itself, or you can get this information from reading and researching one of your other sources. Here's the deal. Make sure that the sources you get your information from are consistent with the opinion, okay? So here's how I laid out my background. I wanted to put a battle of beliefs up front, right? The best thing the arbiters of decency and good taste can do is to stay out of other people's lives. The greatest right that any nation can afford its people is the right to be left alone. Larry Flint. Okay, so he's our pornographer. This is his quote. On the other side, we have, I hope I live to see the day when, as in the early days of our country, we won't have any public schools. The churches will have taken them over again, and Christians will be running them. What a happy day that will be. So that's Jerry Falwell. So we're getting this battle, that title says Battle of Beliefs. So leading up to this, we know we have this battle of beliefs between these two people, right? Here is my slide leading to what happened. Falwell's anti-pornography campaign targeted Flint. Flint's response, and then I quoted what he said. So when you use quotes, you want to use quotes like in my last slide that show what the parties themselves say, or it gives a really strong insight into your case, okay? I don't want you quoting newspaper articles about what they say about the case. You need to put those in your own format, and they don't need to be complete sentences. For example, Falwell's anti-pornography campaign targeted Flint. Very short. It's a complete sentence, but very short to let you know. And I came up, those are my words that I got the information from footnote 5, okay? Then, as Flint's response, I put his quote. After several years of listening to him bash me and reading his insults, I decided it was time to start poking some fun at him. So then I put the article, or the ad that he put in Hustler magazine, and below it I described it. The November 1983 issue of Hustler magazine featured a parody of an advertisement for Campari liquor that contained a picture of Falwell and was titled Jerry Falwell Talks About His First Time. The parody was modeled after actual Campari ads that included interviews with various celebrities about their first times, playing on the sexual double entendres of the general subject of first times. So basically, I just put my last thing is not a full sentence, but I put it in there, and I can follow it as a reader. You can follow it, what I'm talking about, okay? So this is what led up to it. So then we go to the case, and that's going to be 20 points. And you're going to explain the case and the stages of appeal that's easy to understand, All right. So the first thing you're going to do is someone's going to file a lawsuit, right? Well, I put the initial lawsuit as my title page. And I put Falwell filed 3 tort claims and I listed them. Now, the one I put a little asterisk above because it's not really relevant to the case that went up to the Supreme Court because the district court dismissed it because they're they could not prove that, or meaning Falwell could not prove that the damages arose out of the use of likeness or purpose for trade, which is required. So I took that asterisk and I put it in my notes. Okay. So that's gone. I'm not focusing on that. That's in my notes. What I'm going to focus on then is these 2 claims that they filed and the jury verdict. What I did is I outlined those 2 cases and I put jury ruled for Hustler Flint because no reasonable man would believe that the parody was describing actual facts about Falwell. And the reason I put what the actual claim was is so I could show, hey, for libel and defamation, you need to have that. And then I put jury found Hustler and Flint both liable, awarding $100,000 in damages. Okay. So that's how I outlined it. And you can see right there, it's very concise. Again, this would take like 2 pages to write all this out, but it's so concise and you can just put it in there. Okay. So then we're going to have an appeal, right? So I put the appeal of Hustler Flint. So I know who appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 4th District. And I just put the argument that the advertisement was a parody and should be protected by the First Amendment. Then I put the court's decision of the 4th Circuit or 4th District. It's irrelevant that the jury found that the ad parody did not describe actual facts about the respondent. The issue is whether the ad's publication was sufficiently outrageous. So remember, we're in that intentional infliction to constitute intentional infliction of emotional distress. So the issue is, hey, what they're saying is parody, if we're going to sue under intentional infliction of emotional distress, you don't get to use that as a protection and claim a First Amendment. So it goes all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and then I cite the case. And what I put in here, as I thought it was interesting, was, not only what they were addressing, but the fact that it tells us that this case presents us with a novel question, and this is from the case, okay, involving First Amendment limitation upon a state's authority to protect its citizens from the intentional infliction of emotional distress. We must decide whether a public figure may recover damages for emotional harm caused by the publication of an ad parody offense to him, and doubtless gross and repugnant in the eyes of most. And I thought that was a very, very powerful way that the court put it, so I quoted them. So then we have the U.S. Supreme Court decision. All right. So first, I put a picture of Larry Flynn outside the U.S. Supreme Court and a quote by him: a free press is not freedom for the thought you love, but rather the thought you hate the most. Because that's his argument on appeal, is I should be able to what? This is a parody, right? That's what they had appealed. Falwell's argument: it is of no constitutional import whether the statement was a fact or opinion or whether it was true or false. The state's interest in preventing emotional harm from outrageous behavior simply outweighs whatever interest a speaker may have in the speech of this type. So that's the 2 arguments that the U.S. Supreme Court are looking at, right? Well, then I put the Supreme Court look to precedent. And basically, a case, New York Times versus Sullivan, was a landmark freedom of speech case that occurred that the court looked to. And it was a libel lawsuit against New York Times, and it established precedent for greater protection of speech involving political or public figures. And the court emphasized the need to maintain free political discussion. So then I put what? Jerry Falwell? They considered him a public figure, right? And I've got him up there in a picture with a Christian coalition that he was basically the head of. All right. So here, then, what do we do? He's a public figure, and we got this other case that says in libel or defamation cases, we have more protection. What will the court do here? So to show that, I quoted again the Chief Justice Rehnquist saying outrageousness in the area of political and social discourse has an inherent subjectiveness about it, which would allow a jury to impose liability on the basis of the juror's tastes or views or their dislike of a particular expression. An outrageousness standard thus runs afoul of our long-standing refusal to allow damages to be awarded because the speech in question may have an adverse emotional impact on the audience. That's his whole explanation for what was the holding, saying, hey, public figures and officials, if they want to recover for this tort, then they have to show that the publication contains a false statement of fact, and then it has to be made with actual malice or with knowledge that, which means with malice means with knowledge that the statement was false or with reckless disregard as to whether or not it was true. So now that you have to show that it was a statement of fact and not a joke or opinion or that something that no reasonable person would believe is fact, right? Because that's why they lost libel. This is what they decided. Okay? And then your last part of this is the conclusion, and it's 5 points, and you just want to explain how the case impacts business law and what lessons can we learn. Well, the case demonstrates the power of free speech when it involves political speech. That right there is the importance of this, is when it involves political speech, we have a greater protection. So it's very powerful. And so basically this court's decision protected political satire. Okay. And then I put a quote that was again in the case that said the political cartoon is a weapon of attack, of scorn and ridicule and satire. It is least effective when it tries to pat some politician on the back. It is usually as welcome as a bee sting and is always controversial in some quarters. So I put what I said was the importance, but then I supported it with a strong quote. Okay. You do not want to use quotes for everything, right? You put your points in there, but quotes are also very powerful to help you with your case. The last portion of grading is overall presentation. And basically, do the slides begin with a strong headline? Now, when you're talking about the parties, I just put Larry Flynt. I don't have to put more than that for that. What I'm talking about strong headline is when we're trying to make our point as to what's going on in the case or what's important at the end. Is it easy to follow? Do we have strong visual evidence, right? Like when you saw my slide, I put it together and I gave these visuals. I gave Larry Flynt outside the courthouse and Jerry Falwell outside the courthouse. The last slide had a little old-fashioned political satire, right? Do they have a consistent look and feel? Do not just go and put a presentation of bullet points. That is not going to get you a lot of points here because, first of all, you're just throwing a bunch of stuff on a slide and hoping that you're getting the right information. Sometimes less is better because it shows me you really know the basis of this case. Is it original, inventive, and is it a unique and interesting way? And then that you have no spellings or grammatical errors. And I don't mean none. We all make mistakes. We have, things out of place. I mean very, very few. Okay? If you give me something that has a lot of misspellings and grammatical errors, then you're probably going to get some points deducted. So here is the overall grading. I think you can have fun with this. I really do. I think putting these presentations are really fun. Do not put animations in it because what I want is if I just took the slide sheets, I want to be able to understand what you are doing and what you're talking about. So I'm going to actually save mine as a PDF, the presentation, and I will also post it so that you can take a look at it. As always, please, 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 if you're confused or you have any questions, let me know. I'm always here to help you. If you want to know if you're on the right track, you can let me know. But what I suggest you do is just look up some U.S. Supreme Court cases that on Google of the area you want to do, and then read about them a little, and then decide if that's the case that you want to do. So good luck, and let me know if you need anything.